Well, hello everybody, I hope you're all well. Welcome back to another Doctor Who book review. In today's review, I'm going to be kicking off my reviews of the latest 2024 Target novelisations from Penguin Books. This wave is entirely dedicated to the first series of adventures with the 15th Doctor and of course Ruby Sunday, starting off with 73 Yards as adapted by Doctor Who script editor Scott Handcock. Now, when this series initially broadcast, I didn't do episode reviews, I didn't really discuss the episodes online, so it's going to be a really nice opportunity to discuss the stories, but also how they've been adapted into the Target novelisation style. Following on with the same design that was used for the 60th anniversary releases, we have this lovely star field in the background with a darker blue and black towards the top, lots of white dots representing stars. The Who logo is nicely embossed there. As always, it's really pretty, it stands out a lot. And we also have the Target novelisation logo at the top too. The blue theme does also continue onto the spine, which is different to the original new series targets from a few years ago, of course a lighter blue. The lettering itself is incredibly bold in multiple different colours. I was very excited when I found out that Scott Handcock was going to be adapting this story. Of course, I'm rather familiar with his Big Finish work. And of course a big Target welcome to Daniel Lyles, who's now doing the cover art for this series. So much lovely detail across this cover art. The depiction of Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday is absolutely spot on. I love the colours and it's so precise, it's a really lovely likeness. Ruby is sat within the Welsh countryside, probably figuring out what the hell to do. The delicate shrubbery and various flowers there going up the TARDIS, it's been left there for quite a long time. Even the tiny propaganda posters, excellently recreated from the TV show. That likeness to Roger Ap William is really impressive. The stark contrast to the countryside stuff going on. Even the TARDIS is stunning. I fear that this could be overlooked, but I love the wood grain effect, the various shades of blue, and even the pull to open lettering there on the panels and the windows shining rather vibrantly. Lovely preview there of the countryside, and there she is, of course, the creepy woman lurking in the background. Flipping around to the back of the book, we have a rather familiar design to the previous new series releases. It's very smart yet simple. How long is 73 yards? Clearly, when you've got a creepy Welsh woman following you, it's not far enough. I've got to say, I wasn't much of a fan of the dark blue and black colour scheme on the 60th anniversary targets, but with these releases, I think it works better. We have an isolated image there of Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday, a very brief story synopsis, and the traditional Target novel caption there below with all the various credits, and all of your usual company information is limited to the bottom. It looks rather neat. Format-wise, the book spans 173 pages across 15 named chapters, and typography-wise, really nice size font. I found it a really pleasant and accessible read. It goes far to say that this one is my favourite design of the entire wave, so we're definitely starting out on a high, a really lovely design. And of course there is an audiobook version of 73 Yards as well, read by none other than Susan Twist, of course, being Susan Triad from the series finale, and many other cameos throughout this series. When reading the 60th anniversary Target novelisations, I did consider to myself if adapting very new Doctor Who TV stories to Target novelisation form immediately was a good idea. The joys and strengths of new Who Target novelisations for the likes of Rose, Dalek, The Waters of Mars has been, I think, that time that has passed since the initial transmission. Being able to revisit 2000s stories under a new lens, introduce new characters, new scenes and new references. It's a new way to experience a story that no doubt you've watched many times before. I think 73 Yards is a different matter. Despite being a very new Doctor Who TV story, this Target novel offers the opportunity to explore the narrative in new and exciting ways. And that isn't to say that this book deviates greatly from the TV script. It doesn't, and that's not the point. These books aren't meant to do that. But what it does do is allow the reader to pause, let moments sink in, and explore the thoughts and feelings surrounding that particular moment. For the likes of 73 Yards, I think that is really important. I really do praise Scott Handcock for how well this story flows. It's bold and impressive because it's basically a Doctor Light story, and I know for a fact that if I was writing a Target novelisation, I would not want to be writing a Doctor Light episode, because I think that brings challenges that usual traditional Doctor Who stories don't have. Your main protagonist isn't present. So this story is instead carried by Ruby Sunday, exploring her world, the way that she is haunted by this mysterious Welsh figure, and the impact that this has on her life mentally and socially. There is lots of big unknowns with this plot, it raises lots of questions, and whilst this pushes the narrative forward, I think the unknowns are also the reason why the reception to this episode when it initially aired were a tad sceptical. I think especially once you watch the episode once, you still had lots of questions within your head because it was very odd overall. The big unknown, the paranormal element of this tale feels, I think, a lot more dangerous within this target novelisation than it did on screen. Maybe the book dwells on these matters a little bit more precisely. In fact, it reminds me of a Big Finish Torchwood monthly range story in the methods that it uses to dig into the past, particularly the scenes within the pub. These are incredibly twisted and they just completely taunt Ruby into thinking that she's going mental, which, you know, is really nice, isn't it? I came to realise at this moment, as well throughout the rest of the book, that a lot of my understanding of Welsh folklore and Welsh history has actually came from the Torchwood monthly range, because when the Mary Lloyd is mentioned, I instantly knew what that was, which, you know, I mean, if I'm going to learn about Welsh history, I suppose Torch was the way to do it. That thread of paranormal and unknown and curses is then woven throughout the rest of the story. It instantly sets a certain style, sets a certain atmosphere that is then persistent throughout. The way the visual and emotional description is used throughout this story is also incredibly gripping. When everything goes wrong at the beginning, the TARDIS appears to drain of life and energy. Ruby Sunday seems to be completely left alone with zero answers. And there is apparently this darkness surrounding the mysterious figure, and the bad luck of course then surrounds both her and Ruby throughout the rest of the adventure. Ruby's emotions sink when she realises the force that she's dealing with has a little bit of a personal grudge against her. The chilly and cold references throughout also tie in nicely with the snow plot arc, which then encompasses the entirety of this series, the ambiguity and the memories represented within the snow of course harking back to Ruby's past, and the terminology used within this book is very consistent between the other target novelisations within this range as well, in particular the likes of Church on Ruby Road and the Space Babies. So I think when read together, that is really satisfying. It feels like we're building up this new world for Series 1, but through the book format instead of on screen. I think there is also more opportunities to dwell on the mysterious woman's interactions within this book, especially when she talks to others, and how it makes those surrounding Ruby feel, and how she is to blame for these mysterious events going on, basically haunting everybody. This really hammers home the implications of 73 Yards within Ruby's family unit, the ramifications of the woman's words on Carla, and the personal wounds and vulnerabilities this opens up within Ruby. Scott's writing is rather brutal and hard-hitting, to be honest. It really makes you connect and feel for Ruby throughout the entirety of this journey, and I was half expecting her to curl up into a ball and cry at basically any moment. If you thought she had a rough ride within the TV episode, I feel like this one gives her an even rougher ride. This target novelisation also explores Ruby's romantic life a little bit more deeply. Scott examines those relationships in a little bit more detail. In fact, she gives quite a number of the people names, which is a good start. And we have that constant sense that Ruby is always thinking about something else, i.e. that woman that is always lurking over her shoulder. Within the episode itself, on our screens, of course, Millie Gibson's performance was incredibly strong, and it made me appreciate Ruby as a character a lot more. It was an essential moment for me as a viewer to connect with Ruby. Instead, within this book, we have Scott Handcock's writing. This sheds more light on Ruby, and if anything, it makes the events of the TV story even bleaker and even more depressing. And as the years pass, you really feel Ruby developing and responding to her experiences. So whilst, of course, logically, we don't have Millie Gibson within this book, I think that the way that Scott writes the episode feels incredibly personal, and you still get really lovely interactions with this main character. The biggest compliment I think that I can give this book, other than being really enjoyable, and I basically got through it within the space of an evening, is that throughout there is these little references to the practicalities of life, which may seem really small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things, especially given that this is science fiction and it's not really meant to be real, but to me they add an element of reality to the narrative, which the TV episode lacks. I feel like Russell T Davies' Era 1 felt a lot more polished. There was a lot less loose ends things, and each episode tied up into a neat box, and it had a little bow on top, and everything seemed to be catered for. But the more recent episodes of Doctor Who, perhaps the way that it's edited or represented on screen, I feel like there's lots of loose ends, and it's down to the viewer to interpret quite a lot of the things that go on within the subplot. In some ways, it can be the really little references, such as when Ruby is waiting outside the TARDIS, not quite sure if the Doctor is going to pop up again, and she's worried that the TARDIS is just going to dematerialise, so she wants to reassure the TARDIS that she will be back eventually. But also, before she moves back to London, she's going to phone her mum to see if she's okay and just let her know that she's coming back. It's little things like that that we didn't see within the TV story, but it makes sense. Within this book, we explore where Ruby is living now, where she's employed, how she's getting by on a day-to-day basis, especially now that she's no longer living with Cherry and Carla. There is also even references to Ruby's friends that we briefly met within the church on Ruby Road, which is great for consistency. Again, it makes Ruby feel like a living and breathing character, although I would have loved to maybe have an additional chapter or two seeing Ruby interact with these friends and probably struggle by whilst doing it. It wouldn't have contributed too much to the plot itself, but it would have been a nice Easter egg and maybe a good opportunity just to give those friends a little bit more development. Ultimately, these are little things that the TV story simply did not have time to cover, but the target novelisation is different, and it allows us to take a little bit of luxury in Ruby's life and learn a bit more about her as a person. The brief scene within the episode with Unit also feels more realistic. In the course of the events that lead Ruby up until that moment, contextually, we hear how she reached out to them, how she found herself discovering Kate Stewart, and because of this narrative padding, my confidence in the story grew further. It felt like there were less gaps, the story feels more real, and as a result, I found myself appreciating the narrative actually a lot more, even though I still really enjoyed the TV story. I felt satisfied because it was filling in those little gaps that I had when viewing, but also it doesn't take away from the mystery of the story. There is lots of lovely treats throughout, which make reading this book really rewarding. The political aspects of the narrative too also feel more padded out, whilst not straying too far from the TV narrative. Roger Ap William is incredibly well written. I want to say that I felt more connected with the character, but that is completely the wrong choice of words. I hated him more is probably a more accurate description. There is more to sink your teeth into, more to feel and more to understand about how venomous and evil he is. Scott's writing is very strong because he makes the reader read in between the lines, so viewers of varying ages will no doubt find their own grim interpretations of the narrative, which I think again makes this future dystopia with this political party all the more hard-hitting. At the time, I can recall a lot of people saying that this future potential version of Earth and this timeline felt very real, and because it was so brief within the story, I was expecting Roger Ap William to have a more pivotal role, be in more scenes, especially the way that he was announced. So when the story broadcast, I did think, oh, is that it for this timeline? Is that all that we're going to see? But within this story, I did definitely come to appreciate the grimness of this future a lot more. I was always going to go into 73 Yards as a target novelisation with perhaps more excitement than other stories, because it's one of the highlights, I personally think, of the most recent series, and I also have a lot of confidence and respect for the pen behind the words, and I know that Scott Handcock's work with character is always to an incredibly high standard, so seeing his name on a target novelisation, even from the get-go, was a treat. And yes, whilst this book is a rather reliant retelling of the TV story, and if you've watched the TV episode you do know exactly what to expect, I still felt rewarded from the listening experience. The references are lovely, the additional scenes add to the story's practicality, and the whole narrative just feels more real and gritty. We are living and breathing this rather depressing world alongside Ruby, as well as all the bleakness which comes with it. Oh, and I've got to say, I've got to tease, because I mean like that surprise cameo also made me smile very much. A lovely, great touch. So there we go, that is my review of the target novel adaptation of 73 Yards as written by Scott Handcock, and without a doubt, this book has set the bar of expectation high for the rest of the targets released within this range. As soon as they landed on my doorstep, I knew this was the one that I wanted to read first, and it absolutely paid off. So I do recommend this one, especially if you like the story, or if you like the TV episode, but felt like there were unanswered questions and you want to dig a little bit more deeply into the narrative. So do of course stay tuned on those productions for regular Doctor Who reviews, and of course more Target novelisation reviews over the next few days and weeks. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, I shall see you all next time.